The diplomatic quarters of the Varathi settlement hummed with the quiet efficiency of a species that had mastered interstellar travel 3 millennia before humans had discovered fire. Ilara Quinn stood at the observation window, watching the twin suns paint the alien sky in shades of violet and gold that Earth's atmosphere could never reproduce. She was the first human ambassador to the Varathi homeworld, a role that came with equal parts honor and isolation. The Varathi were a feline-like species, elegant and precise in all things. Their society valued composure, logic, and emotional restraint, qualities that made Ilara's naturally expressive human nature feel like navigating a minefield of cultural faux pas. Ambassador Quinn, came the melodic voice of her liaison. Counselor Varesh, the younglings' educational session will begin shortly. Your attendance would honor us. Ilara turned from the window, forcing her face into what she hoped was appropriate diplomatic neutrality, 3 weeks into her assignment, and she still hadn't mastered the Varathi art of the perfectly controlled expression. I'd be delighted. The learning chamber was a circular space with bioluminescent walls that shifted colors according to the lesson being taught. 24 Varathi cubs sat in perfect rows, their small triangular ears perked forward, tails wrapped neatly around their bodies. The instructor, a silver-furred elder named Sharath, acknowledged Ilara with a slight incline of his head. Today, we study the newest members of the Galactic Assembly, Sharath announced, gesturing toward Ilara, the humans. 24 pairs of luminous eyes fixed on her with disconcerting intensity. Ilara felt her pulse quicken, an involuntary human response that the Varathi would find primitive. One cub in the front row caught her attention. Smaller than the others, with cream-colored fur and impossibly large eyes, the youngling seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. Its tail twitched despite obvious efforts to keep it still. Humans, Sharath continued, are notable for their emotional volatility, their inefficient social structures, and their peculiar reliance on facial expressions for communication. Ilara kept her diplomatic smile in place, though internally she bristled at the characterization. This was the Varathi way, direct, factual, without malice but also without softening. They are also, Sharath added with what might have been grudging respect, remarkably adaptable and possess an unusual capacity for forming bonds across species lines. The small cub in the front suddenly convulsed, its whole body contracting. Then came the sound, a tiny, explosive chuff that echoed in the silent chamber. A sneeze. The cub's eyes went wide with mortification. Around the room, other cubs stiffened, their ears flattening in second-hand embarrassment. Sharath's tail gave one sharp lash of disapproval. Ilara couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled up from her chest, not mockery but delight at the sheer adorableness of the tiny sneeze. The sound rang out in the chamber like a bell. Every eye turned to her. The silence grew thicker. I apologize, Ilara said quickly, though her smile remained. It reminded me of human children. We find such things endearing. Sharath's whiskers twitched. The loss of bodily control is endearing? Yes, Ilara said simply. It's authentic, real. It means you're alive and imperfect and... She paused, searching for words that would translate. It makes you relatable. The cub stared at her as if she'd spoken in quantum equations. But the small cream-furred one, she would later learn his name was Tiri, looked at her with something new in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or hope. By mid-afternoon, Ilara had returned to her quarters to file reports when her communicator chimed. Counselor Varesh's face appeared on the screen, his expression more unsettled than she'd ever seen it. Ambassador Quinn, we have a situation in the learning chamber. 15 minutes later, Ilara stood in the doorway of the chamber, struggling to process what she was seeing. Every single cub was coughing, not distressed coughing, theatrical coughing, exaggerated coughing. One cub would let out a dramatic huff, and several others would dissolve into chittering sounds that might have been laughter. Then another would try, making an even more elaborate production of it. Tiri sat in the center of the chaos, demonstrating a particularly creative interpretation that involved his whole body and a small flourish with his tail at the end. The other cubs watched with rapt attention before erupting into their own versions. Sharath stood to one side, his tail lashing in complete bewilderment. They won't stop, he said when he noticed Ilara. We've explained that voluntary respiratory disruption serves no purpose. We've appealed to their sense of decorum. Nothing works. Ilara pressed her lips together, fighting the smile that threatened to break free. May I try? Sharath gestured helplessly. Ilara walked to the center of the room. The cubs quieted, watching her with luminous eyes. Tiri's tail twitched hopefully. So, Ilara said, sitting down cross-legged on the floor, a posture that made Sharath's fur bristle with impropriety. You've discovered silliness. 24 heads tilted in synchronization. On Earth, Ilara continued, human children do this constantly. They make silly sounds, silly faces, silly movements. Do you know why? Silence. Then Tiri, brave little Tiri, spoke up. Because it's fun? The word fun in Varathi was rarely used. It was a concept acknowledged but not particularly valued. Efficiency, purpose, advancement, these were the pillars of their society. Yes, Ilara said warmly. Because it's fun. Because sometimes being alive isn't just about being perfect or purposeful. Sometimes it's about connecting with others through shared joy. When I laughed at Tiri's sneeze, I wasn't mocking him. I was celebrating a moment of genuine, unscripted life. She made a small coughing sound, nothing like a real cough, exaggerated and silly. Several cubs' eyes widened. Then she did it again, adding a little theatrical flair. Tiri erupted into delighted chittering. Within seconds, the entire chamber dissolved into a cacophony of fake coughs, real laughter, and the sound of tails thumping against the floor in Varathi joy. Sharath looked at Ilara with an expression she couldn't quite read. You've taught them something we cannot unteach. Good, Ilara said, grinning as Tiri attempted to teach her the tail flourish move. The galaxy could use a little more laughter. 3 months later, the Galactic Assembly would receive a formal request from the Varathi Council. They wanted to establish a cultural exchange program, with human teachers specifically requested for their unique educational perspectives. Attached to the formal request was a video file. It showed Counselor Varesh, the epitome of Varathi dignity and restraint, in his private quarters. He looked directly at the camera, his expression serious. Then he made a small theatrical cough followed by a tail flourish, and he smiled. The universe, it seemed, was learning to laugh.